Welcome to The Explainer. I am so thrilled you're here today because we are going to unpack something that literally every single homeowner fears, but honestly, very few truly understand until it's way too late. We're looking at the anatomy of a home water crisis. You see, water is incredibly persistent, and when it breaches your home's defenses, you are instantly thrust into this high-stakes race against time. So we're going to break down exactly how these disasters unfold, the hidden dangers creeping right behind your drywall, and the absolutely fascinating science of how professionals pull a home back from the brink of total ruin. Okay, let's dive into this. Picture it for a second. It's 2 a.m. in the dead of winter. The temperature has just plummeted, and suddenly you hear it, that terrifying rush of water. A pipe in your uninsulated crawl space has burst, and hundreds of gallons of freezing water are just pouring directly into your basement. Your heart sinks, right? What do you do? Who do you call? And more importantly, what is actually happening to the structure of your house in that exact moment? Water doesn't exactly wait for regular business hours, and in a scenario like this, every single minute that passes dictates whether you are looking at a minor inconvenience or a massive catastrophic structural loss. So let's look at Section 1, the perfect storm, a real-world case study in vulnerability. To truly grasp how devastating this can be, we're going to look at Medford, Massachusetts. It's basically the absolute perfect example of a community living right on the edge of extreme water vulnerability. First up, you have the geography. Medford sits right in the Mystic River watershed, meaning local water tables are naturally incredibly high. Next, add the soil. It's super heavy in clay, which drains poorly. So when water hits it, it's got nowhere to go. Now imagine dropping thousands of pre-1950s homes right on top of that clay. These beautiful, older houses often have original cast iron plumbing that is literally corroding from the inside out. Plus, they feature old balloon frame structures and horsehair plaster that act just like giant sponges. Finally, subject all of that to brutal New England winter freeze-thaw cycles that crack foundation walls. This combination essentially turns these homes into giant water magnets. And it's not just the static conditions you have to worry about. It's the seasonal triggers. When a huge winter nor'easter rolls through, dumping heavy rain or maybe heavy snow loads that form ice dams on roofs, it aggressively exploits those existing structural weaknesses. Then, of course, comes the spring thaw. Melting snow combines with spring rain, totally overwhelming the drainage systems. That naturally high groundwater we just talked about, it gets pushed forcefully against those cracked foundation walls and directly into those older basements. It is a relentless, seasonal assault on the home's envelope. Which brings us to Section 2, the ticking clock, and exactly why minutes matter. When a breach actually happens, the whole tone shifts instantly. A leak is not just a static puddle sitting on your floor. It's a compounding, fast-moving disaster wicking up your walls, saturating your subfloors, and creating a microscopic breeding ground. The clock starts ticking the very second that pipe bursts or that groundwater seeps in. And get this, you only have 24 to 48 hours. That is the exact critical window before mold begins to colonize wet materials. In a humid climate, especially during those sticky summer months, mold spores will latch onto porous materials like drywall, insulation, and carpeting within a day or two. If you wait around to call for help, or if you just try to dry it out yourself with a few old box fans, you are opening the door to a massive environmental health hazard right inside your home. Now, this perfectly illustrates that not all water is created equal. Clean water from a burst supply line is incredibly damaging, for sure, but initially, it's not a severe health risk. Category 3 water, often called black water, is an entirely different beast. We're talking about raw sewage backing up from cracked, aging cast iron sewer lines or external floodwaters carrying who knows what kind of contaminants. Category 3 requires completely different, super strict state-regulated safety protocols, EPA-registered antimicrobials, and highly specialized disposal. You simply cannot treat a raw sewage backup the same way you treat a leaky refrigerator line. Because of these rapidly escalating threats, professional restoration teams in vulnerable areas actually aim for a lightning-fast 90-minute deployment. Remember, water compounds every single hour you wait. If a crew can get there within 90 minutes, they can actually stop the water before it deeply saturates vulnerable materials, like that historic horsehair plaster or those old subfloors we mentioned. A faster response directly translates to way less destruction, lower overall costs, and a significantly better chance of saving the original structure rather than having to rip the whole room down to the studs. Moving right along to Section 3, the 3-step rescue, diving into professional mitigation. Let's move to and see how this builds. So, how exactly do the professionals pull off a rescue like this? For crews certified by the IICRC, which is the standard-setting nonprofit for the restoration industry, it involves a highly technical, precise blueprint. It happens in 3 logical, absolutely non-negotiable phases, designed to take your home from total chaos back to normal. First, emergency extraction, getting the standing water out immediately. Second, structural drying, the careful science of pulling moisture out of the building materials. And finally, step 3, full restoration. Phase 1 is really all about raw power and high-tech. Crews arrive with these massive truck-mounted extraction units that can literally pump out thousands of gallons of standing water per hour. They're pulling up soaked carpets and padding to stop the water from seeping any deeper. But here's the cool part. They aren't just relying on what they can see with the naked eye. They use advanced thermal imaging cameras to peer behind your walls and under your floorboards. These cameras actually detect the tiny temperature variations caused by hidden moisture, allowing the crew to pinpoint exactly where the water has traveled inside the hidden cavities of the house. Once that standing water is completely gone, we enter the drying phase, which usually takes anywhere between 3 to 7 days. On day 1, industrial dehumidifiers and high-velocity air movers are placed incredibly strategically to manipulate the airflow and the room's humidity. Over days 3 through 7, technicians rely on the actual science of psychrometry, that's the study of air, humidity, and moisture, taking daily readings from the materials to track the progress. They don't just guess when it feels dry. They have a hard scientific target. Wood framing must be brought down to a 15% moisture content limit or even less. Until it hits that safe level, the drying continues to ensure no mold can possibly survive. So the crucial point is understanding the big difference between 2 terms you will constantly hear thrown around in this industry: remediation versus restoration. Remediation is essentially the emergency room phase. It's the extraction, the drying, the sanitizing. It stops the bleeding and stabilizes the property. Restoration, on the other hand, is the reconstructive surgery. That's replacing the drywall, installing beautiful new flooring, matching the paint colors perfectly, and putting your house back together. A full-service professional outfit handles both, smoothly transitioning your home from a disaster zone straight back to normal. All right, our final stop is Section 4, Navigating the Aftermath. Let's tackle the insurance maze. Let's be honest, navigating a homeowner's insurance claim can literally feel like wandering through a maze blindfolded. But here is the absolute golden rule to keep in mind. Coverage almost always comes down to the word sudden. Sudden and accidental events, like a pipe suddenly bursting in a winter freeze or a storm violently tearing off your roof shingles, are usually covered. On the flip side, gradual leaks you may be ignored for months, neglected maintenance, or external floods from overflowing rivers or storm surges, those are usually excluded entirely, and they actually require a completely separate flood insurance policy. Because insurance adjusters are incredibly strict, they are just going to take your word for it. They demand rigorous, undeniable proof. And this is exactly why certified professionals take such extensive, detailed logs. They provide comprehensive moisture mapping, logs of those thermal imaging scans we talked about, the daily psychrometry readings tracking the drying progress, and highly detailed photos of every single phase of the cleanup. This massive mountain of technical documentation is precisely what is needed to prove to the insurance company that the proper protocols were strictly followed, which goes a long way in preventing those heartbreaking claim denials. And honestly, all of that leads to this incredibly reassuring sentiment. When you have seasoned professionals managing both the complex technical drawing of your home and the heavy, stressful burden of the insurance paperwork, the panic really does start to subside. You aren't stuck fighting with adjusters on the phone or trying to coordinate 5 different contractors all on your own. The burden is completely lifted right off the homeowner's shoulders. Which brings us to our final big thought for today. Water is, without a doubt, the most patient and persistent enemy your property will ever face. It exploits the smallest tiny cracks, the oldest pipes, and the absolute slightest weather changes. So I want to leave you with this question. Is your home secretly vulnerable? Knowing what you know now about geography, aging infrastructure, and the relentless ticking clock of mold, take a moment today to really look at your own home's defenses. Being prepared and knowing exactly how fast you need to act could literally be the difference between a quick, manageable cleanup and a devastating structural loss. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the anatomy of a water crisis.